The record there is mixed. You know, on the one hand, he has supported opening up offshore oil drilling in some areas. In other places, particularly in the interior West, he has attempted to slow, not actually stop, but slow some of the Bush administration pushes for opening up more oil drilling. So he's kind of on both sides of the issues there. It's really sort of unclear where his heart lies or where his ultimate commitment is on that regard. On agriculture issues, I have a real concern. I mean, he comes from an agricultural state. He comes personally from an agricultural background. And what we've seen is when water issues or endangered species issues in any way suggest that agriculture has to be reformed, he pretty routinely comes down on the side of agriculture. So I think that we're going to have a deep conflict there, and frankly, I think he's got a personal conflict of interest because he himself is a farmer and rancher and has shown that he will come down on those sides when there is a conflict.
Brian Moore, the National Audubon Society, is very supportive of the pick of Ken Salazar to be the next Interior Secretary. Why?
Well, first of all, good morning, Kieran. It's nice to hear your voice. We are supportive of Senator Salazar's pick, and there's a handful of reasons. One way we measure someone's commitment to the environment is really their voting record. And Senator Salazar, as far as we rate things, has voted 8 out of 10 times in favor of what we call the conservation position or the environmental position in his term as a U.S. Senator. And I can remember one of the very first things he did as a senator, and one of the very first actions was to be vocal and forefront, even as a junior senator, in the fight to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And it's an issue that, as he came into Congress, into the Senate, very controversial, an issue that was really a litmus test on whether you're a conservationist or not. And Senator Salazar did not only just come out on the right side of that issue, he became a leader on that issue. So we applaud him for that. Also, as we see the last days of the Bush administration kind of unfold, we see there severe hostility to things like the Endangered Species Act. And Kieran certainly is the expert in that, but we are very optimistic that over the next several months, Congress will help address this issue, and so we do have some concerns about the Endangered Species Act with the current Secretary of Interior, and we're hoping that a more conservation-minded Secretary of Interior, our nation's biggest landlord, will first of all, someone we'll be able to talk to, work with, and persuade that our issues are important, and that ultimately it will be a better relationship than many conservation-minded people have had with the current administration.
And Kieran Suckling, the Secretary of the Interior also has to oversee Native American affairs in the country. He mentioned that in the press conference with President Obama. But your sense, because Salazar comes from a Mexican-American family that traces its roots back about 12 generations in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico, your sense of how he would fulfill that part of his job in terms of policies toward the Native American communities?
You know, it's a little unclear. You know, there aren't strong indications, I think, either way that he would be, you know, especially good or especially bad on that issue. So I'm really not sure where he would go. I know some of the other candidates, like Raul Grijalva, for example, have a very long and very strong record in supporting the rights of Native American groups. He's someone who has, you know, many Native American nations within his district. So we had a lot of confidence in what we would see there, and I'm just not sure what we'll see out of Ken Salazar in that regard.
One of the things, Kieran Suckling, that Senator Salazar has been criticized for is his support of Gail Norton, also from Colorado, to be Interior Secretary. Can you talk about not only Gail Norton, but also William Myers and his support for him to the federal bench?
Yeah, this is a real concern of ours. When Bush nominated Gail Norton for Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar came out and supported her. She ended up, as would have been very easily predictable, being just a terrible Secretary of Interior. She was responsible for the long series of scandals. In fact, even just a few days ago, the Inspector General is still putting out reports on the scandals that her appointees caused at the Department of Interior. It was clear that was where it was going. I mean, she had a industry, not just an industry background, but an anti-environmental lobby firm background coming into that position. Everyone could see what she would do, and yet Ken Salazar came out and supported her, I think because she was from Colorado in part. But I think more than that, I think Ken actually, in his quest to be bipartisan, very often will go out and support just demonstrably bad, demonstrably inappropriate Republican candidates for these positions. Later, he supported, at least at one point in time, Myers for the federal bench, even though he was very controversial at the time. Now, Salazar did later flip-flop and change his position on that. And then when Alberto Gonzalez was up, Salazar not only supported him, he introduced him to the Senate. And I think what we saw there was this desire to be seen as reaching across the aisle as being nonpartisan was so strong that he was willing to take demonstrably bad positions to get there. And that's what I really worry about in terms of the Secretary of Interior. His job is going to be to help select very important people: head of the Park Service, head of Bureau of Land Management, head of Mineral Management Services, head of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And if he shows the same inclination he has in the past, we could end up with some very bad appointees. And as he attempts to resolve a lot of the conflicts that every Secretary of Interior is going to be faced with, if he views his job as fundamentally to be bipartisan, not fundamentally to protect the environment, I think we can expect to see some dangerous decisions based on this past record. So that is, it's very disturbing to me, because this position is a position of power and of judgment. And if you can't trust the judgment, you shouldn't give the power.
And Brian Moore, what about this issue of Salazar's support for Gail Norton, who I'm sure was not one of the favorite Interior Secretaries of the Audubon Society?
Well, Secretary Norton, without question, may have been one of the most anti-conservation, anti-environmental secretaries of Interior ever. Very disturbing Secretary of the Interior. They did come from the same state, and I think no one could predict just how corrupt and how anti-environmental and anti-conservation the Bush administration under the leadership of Gail Norton could have been. It was really something that was even more far-reaching than conservationists, who of course opposed her nomination, could have seen. So you knew she was not going to be great. It was absolutely surprising as to how far they were willing to go. So supporting her certainly is something that we didn't do, but being surprised by really how controversial and anti-conservation, anti-environment the decision-making that she took as secretary were, although we knew they weren't going to be great, let's face it, they went very far, further than we would have ever expected. So there were some surprises held with Secretary Norton, and we believe that the incoming secretary has seen those things happen, or at least the nominated secretary has seen those things, and is someone that we can work with, talk with, and is certainly agreeable to our point of view on many things, and certainly someone who listens to conservation groups and all sides, and hopefully, you have a say. You can talk to people and persuade them on what your point of view is, and we believe that Senator Salazar has made a lot of great environmental decisions as a senator, and we look forward to working with him as Secretary of Interior. And we think there's a lot of great things that can happen and a lot of fantastic improvements over the last 8 years to be had.
Brian Moore, thanks so much for joining us, of the National Audubon Society. And Kieran Suckling, will the Center for Biological Diversity actively oppose Senator Salazar as Secretary of the Interior when he goes up for the Senate confirmation hearing?
Well, we're going to have to see how that plays out. The unfortunate thing is the Senate virtually always approves senators who are up for these positions. We saw that with Kempthorne earlier, when there was a chance that we could have stopped Kempthorne. So there's a good amount of time between now and that Senate vote, or even heavy lobbying